Okay, taking up with part 5 of the 30s and the beginning of the Depression. I wanted to do one flashback on manufacturing to illustrate the importance of fixed costs or overhead costs as sales go down. This is an extreme example, but it will illustrate the principle. All right, you probably know that General Motors has a big assembly plant or car factory in Arlington, Texas. They mainly make pickups and Suburbans and that kind of vehicle. Okay, costs a lot to run that plant. Now, the money that they get to pay for that plant and its operations come from the sale of vehicles. So here's my extreme example. What if that plant only produced one Chevy Suburban in a model year? I don't mean one type, I mean one unit. How much would that car have to cost to make that plant profitable? A vast, incomprehensible sum. So the more units they sell, the smaller percentage each one has to pay for of the fixed costs. Well, they probably pay for their variable costs, but the fixed cost, the overhead. So only if they can sell thousands and thousands and thousands of units is that fixed cost averaged out among that many units that they sell. So a big factory like that has to run pretty efficiently. If they don't sell enough, they can't afford to run it. We haven't got to that, but who knows? Okay. We've seen how 3 main areas of the economy went into collapse. It's not completely collapsed, but we're going to look at the statistical proportions. What do the numbers tell us? And we'll be comparing from the year it began, 1929, when, as of 2/3 of the way through that year, everything seemed to hit a high peak, and then it fell from there to the low point of the year, which was of this depression, was 1932. Now, so you have a steady fall or a precipitous fall from the last third of 1929 through the summer, at least, of 1932. Then 33, 34, 35, into 36, there's recovery. By late 1936, the economy is almost back up to where it had been in 1929. Not quite, but almost. Okay, then in early 1937, it slid back down again, almost to 1932 levels. It didn't get back up. Now, I'm not talking about the Dow Jones. I'm talking about the economy as a whole. Did not get back to or beyond pre-crash levels until World War II began in Europe. So, the granddaddy of all economic indicators would be the gross domestic product, the GDP. This is the estimated dollar value of all the goods and services produced by the entire economy in a year. And since we've had 90 years of inflation since then, it's going to look very small. But the 1929 gross domestic product, crash and all, stood at $109 billion. All right. The 1932 gross domestic product was $56 billion. The economy had shrunk by almost half. Now, you could get the wrong idea. There are occasionally movies set during the depths of the Depression and that sort of thing. The economy is still there. It's still functioning. Most people still have their jobs. Prices have fallen. Most businesses are still open, but it has shrunk. It has a bunch of people who were players are now left out. They're like out in the cold looking in the window. So we've been through some economic rough times in the last 12 years or so. The whole economy didn't shut down. I want to point out, I'll do it sometime, in a sense, it's regional, okay? The northeastern quadrant of the country is where the bulk of the population lived. We're talking about from New England, New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, Chicago, Minnesota, Wisconsin. They were the hardest hit. Okay, in the South, you have more of an agricultural economy. Prices are down, farmers are struggling, but they can eat. They can still raise beans and potatoes and eat. The South, the West, um, they're all hit hard and business is slow, but the hardest hit would be the industrial states of the Northeast. Okay, one of the last cities to feel the sting was Fort Worth. Not sure why, but of course it gets there soon enough anyway. Now, another major indicator would be the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which peaked at 452 the Friday before Labor Day weekend in 1929, and then the crash happened, and it tumbled to a low on November 13th, climbed back a little, but continues to trend down, down, down until, I think I told you this before, July 8th, 1932, bottomed out for the entire Depression at 58. So almost like 90% of the money that had been invested in securities in stock exchanges has simply vanished. That's an enormous hit. Okay? Um, Stocks of major corporations. I'll be looking down at my cheat sheet here, actually, the supplements, just to get this out there. And I'll put it on the screen. These are comparisons from 1929, a high, to 1932 when they tended to bottom out. These are huge companies at the time. General Motors hit a high in 1929 of $73 a share. 1932 at one point it's down to $8 a share. So if you were a stockholder in General Motors and didn't get out in time, the value of your investment there is only 1/9 of what it had been. Okay? United States Steel, huge corporation at that time, slid from 262 to 22. There used to be a large general market retailer, kind of like Sears and such as that. Those have fallen victim in recent years, but they were enormous in those days. Montgomery Ward. Who even remembers Montgomery Ward? They're as big as Sears. They fell from 138 to $4 a share. These are fortunes just disappearing. Unemployment. We hear about unemployment figures. These are always slippery. They're guesstimates. They're not precise. But just in general, the way things have gone, say, since World War II, is that 5% unemployment is regarded as low. In fact, it used to be called full employment because it's assumed that one worker in 20 will always be between jobs. If it gets up about 8 or 9, that's high, and it's only hit 10% 3 times since the beginning of World War II. And one of those was in March of 2020, when in the space of like 6 weeks, when they shut down the economy in a kind of elephants are afraid of mass reaction to COVID-19, unemployment went from 3% at the beginning of March, regarded as just impossibly low, to around 16%. It's made up most of that since, but it varies over a fairly normal range. That's just for perspective. At the depth of the Depression, unemployment is estimated at being in the 25 to 30% range. Unbelievably high. Now, if you turn that over, you think, no, wait a minute, what you're saying here is that 70 to 75% of the workers still have their jobs. Yeah, I did said that the whole economy didn't just crash and burn. It's just shrunk, and a lot of people have been left out. Okay, and again, that's regionally more of a stinger than others. How do they figure that? First of all, it's not the whole population; it is the labor force. And if you are between the ages of 16 and whatever, and you either have a job or you're looking for a job, you're part of the labor force. How do they know? I mean, you're looking for jobs. Mainly that's people filing unemployment claims. That's how that works. So If you're independently wealthy, you don't have a job, you don't need a job, you're not part of the labor force. And they start, I guess, with teenagers getting jobs as far back as the age of 16. So it's always been fairly loose estimate. Okay. Um, I'll probably take this out. Industrial cities is where unemployment was lowest. New York City, by 1932, there's roughly a million jobless men in New York City. This was a time when it was a little odd for women to have jobs. Okay, Chicago's got 2/3 that, 660,000. Ohio is an industrial state, and these are rounded off figures. Cleveland, Ohio is running a 50% unemployment rate. Akron, Ohio, 60%. Toledo, Ohio, around 80% unemployment. This may be the poster child. Probably a steel mill town called Donora, Pennsylvania, had roughly 13,900 workers living there, and only 277 of them had jobs. Okay? By the end of 1930, and it's not through yet, there's 6 million jobless men in the country. Workers were laid off at the average rate of 100,000 a week for 3 years after the crash. Okay, industrial output. 1932, industrial output's down to 54% of what it had been 3 years earlier. Automobile industry is running at 20% of the 1929 level. Steel industry, 12%. Railroad freight shipments fell by half, and several major railroad companies went out of business. Farm prices, same thing. I told you it was bad for the farmers. It gets a lot worse. Okay, wheat falls from $1.05 a bushel in 1929 to 39 cents a bushel in 1932, and that's less than it would cost to ship it to market. Okay, corn falls from 81 cents a bushel to 33. Cotton, 17 cents a pound to 6. Total farm income fell from 12 billion to 5 billion. I'm going to leave off with an example of how, some people are less affected by this. Most people are affected. Most people, in a way, never lived over it. We'll come to that in the next part. But I love car museums. I like looking at old cars, and one of the best I've ever seen is in San Marcos, Texas. If you ever go down there, check it out. Some filthy rich oil man made this huge collection, like 80 some odd cars, from the earliest cars up to maybe the 50s. He's got one of the 2 original Batmobiles in there. Okay, the high dollar car in this country was called a Duesenberg. That brand is long gone now, victim of the Depression. But he's got several of those looking better than they did on the showroom floor and fully functional. And I told them what they cost. Now, it's the 1930s. You could buy a pimped out Cadillac for probably around $3,000, for perspective. All right. In 1932, depths of the Depression, somebody paid $27,000 for a Duesenberg. So, I'm going to save the rest of this for the next part, and it might not be that long either. I have to go back and do a bunch more videos for 1301. I'm going to, this video will probably be used in future semesters, so I probably better not talk about deadlines on exams. But don't expect any further ones. It's very important for exam 3 that you read the appropriate chapters and work up as much as you can, the multiple choice worksheets and the essay prep. Now, there's the World War II chapter. It's fairly lengthy. It's more about how the war came to be than the war itself. There are a few multiple choice questions from it. Okay, there won't be any essay questions from that. So that's going to be a very key part of your preparation. All right, thank you for your kind attention. We'll go next to the psychological and emotional consequences of all this.